Currently working at Formation Technologies. Kath has spent the last 6 years working as a WordPress consultant and WordPress tutor. And most recently, she has been running a WordPress course at Sydney Community College. So if you're in Sydney and you want to learn about...
I'm not running it anymore.
No, she's not running it anymore. Don't do that. Maybe speak to her afterwards. That would be the best bet.
That's the best.
And she's previously moonlighted as a business coach for web designers and developers over at WP Elevation. Some of you might have heard of that in the room. But I'm going to hand it over to Kath to deliver those G-Berg tips and tricks.
Woo. All right, so welcome to the wonderful world of blocks. How many of you have actually seen that yet? Oh, awesome. How many of you have been too scared to turn it on? A few. How many of you who have turned it on, turned it off? Excellent. Those 5 stay. The rest of you are cool. So last year I talked about the making of Gutenberg from a user experience, user interface perspective, and I talked to some of the people who were involved in that at Automatic, XWP, and over at Yoast. So this year I thought it was fitting that I would actually talk to you guys about how to use the thing, because I sat on the Gutenberg panel last year and I had only used it for about 2 weeks. So I was very optimistic, and I have been pleasantly surprised. Now, Gutenberg has been controversial because it dropped into WordPress quite early. Some people say it's been quite premature in how early it was released. However, it has improved significantly over the last year to a point where I have been a huge advocate for switching all my sites over with not too much interruption. Anyway, I got heaps of stuff, and this is going to be like a live demo. And I did say that AV was the bit that I was most scared about this, but we seem to be working, but forgive me for stuffing it up as we go along. So I'm going to jump right in. This is Gutenberg, but I actually had some proper structure to this for you. All right. Here we go. That's me, that's my son, that's my friend who photobombed us, that's my cat. This is the zebra dress. Last year I wore astronauts in dinosaurs in astronaut costumes. This is the zebra dress. It's important. All right, so I'm going to cover off the interface basics, adding and arranging content, some cool tricks that you might not know about, some plugins that are quite good at extending Gutenberg, how to turn it off without wrecking the rest of your site, and then I'm going to have a bit of a Q&A if I get time. I'm not sure if I will, but let's see. So, Gutenberg interface basics. So we're going to talk about different ways of adding blocks, intro to the types of blocks, sidebar and block settings, settings and options, moving blocks, deleting them, responsive out of the box. Okay, so let me see. Gutenberg interface basics. I am going to move quite fast through this. It will be up on WordPress TV or whatever the heck they call it. No offense, I don't know. Someone will tell you what that is. But I will get Will to tweet the location of my resources later today. I will put them up there because I finished this at 5 o'clock this morning. What's a block? A block's one of these things. So a block is pretty much, a block is just a piece of content, and every single component that you add to the Gutenberg editor consists of this block. So a heading is separate to a paragraph, which is separate to a picture, which is separate to a video. All of those little things are their individual blocks. Gutenberg's not a page builder. It's not a theme, but it's reliant on a theme. It doesn't take over the role of a page builder, in my opinion, but it's really good for putting all sorts of rich and interesting content on pages and posts so that you can get the most out of your publishing experience and get the most information to your customers, clients, visitors, audience, whatever you have looking at your website, your mum, in my case. So that's a block. How do you add one? See all these cool plus tools that kind of hover? So this can be a bit fiddly to use, but there's other ways to get them on the page. So you can go up here and you can add a block like that. And you can hover over here and you can add a block like that. You can press enter and add a block like this. So you've really got no excuses about adding a block onto your page. And so that's kind of how you add one. I'll come back to this later. How do I move one? You kind of move them like this. Or you can kind of move them by dragging and dropping them. Now, see how I've got that blue line there? When you are dragging and dropping, it can be a bit fiddly as well. Just make sure that the blue line, because that indicates where you're actually dropping it. What's the difference between a document and a block? Okay, so this right-hand side menu has a few cool things, but what happens is you've got this document tab, which shows all the parts of the document. If you're familiar with the classic editor, this will be something that you're used to. But what you've also got in the block editor is every block has its own options, and these come under the block. So every different block that you click on, you'll get these extra options and things like that you can then use and extend usually the look and feel or functionality of the block that you're on. So it does give you a few more options than the old editor used to. You can go to just change things quite quickly. Don't recommend you use that one, but anyway. You can change things quite quickly. You have more control than you did before, but still not too much control that you're going to break the whole look and feel of your site. I would recommend going nuts with colours, but you can if you like. So there's just more in there that you wouldn't have had before. So yeah, every kind of block has its own set here. If you want to go back to your document, you simply click between here and here. While I'm on the right-hand side menu, we have the kebab menu. I don't know if that's the official term. I heard it thrown around a bit last year, and so I've stuck with it. And it has a few options. So it allows you to put a toolbar up the top here, so you can access things up here. You can go into full screen mode through that. You can turn on the code editor if you really need to. You can go to block manager. So if you know that you're someone who's easily distracted and you don't want to use all the blocks available to you, you can actually turn off a bunch of these things. I didn't know about this. I think this may even have dropped in the last sort of month or so. But this is kind of cool. So if you know, or you're building sites for clients, if you know that someone is not going to use something, you haven't styled it so it looks good, you just don't want them to see it, you can sort of turn things off for them. So for instance, if I turn off RSS because I haven't set it up, and I hate tag clouds, so I'm going to turn that off in widgets. So when I go and then add a widget block, so you'll see I'm kind of moving between these sections. If you close these down, you have most used, which is the ones that you do use most, but we have all these different kinds of blocks, and I'll go through them a bit more later. But widgets, you'll see that I don't have that RSS feed and stuff in there anymore, or tag cloud. So that's just a nice way of hiding things if you are building for other people particularly, or you just don't want the overwhelm of stuff that you don't want them to be bothered by. Okay. Let's see. So that's the difference between a document and a block, and you can flick between them. What's the kebab menu? There's a kebab menu. Can I still use the normal classic editor? You can. I mean, if you really want to, but it's actually a block type of its own. So you can add a block, and you can go to common blocks, I believe. Oh no, they've moved it. Okay. Here we go, my demo's failing. Formatting, you can go to Classic Editor and then you'll get all the stuff that you're used to in there. So that's helpful. If it's driving you crazy to just put one thing on the page, you can do that. What happens when you bring over old content from the Classic Editor into Gutenberg? It might actually bring up just a whole bunch of these things. You can actually do whatever you need to in there, and then you can convert that block, that classic, into, convert it into a block, and I'll do that. So that's good to know as well. I've blocked things up. How to undo? You can use this little tool, or your regular Command Z, Control Z. So I can click undo there, and I think you get you only get, there you go, you get a few versions of it. And what does it look like on mobile? So out of the box, blocks look good. I'm just going to put in an image here. I'll touch on these a bit more in a second. I'm just going to go into one that I've prepared earlier. All the images are from Unsplash. The theme is Astra, and it's running a Astra starter site for anyone who wants to know what I'm doing with this particular theme. So I'm going to update this. How am I going for time? Okay, and I'm going to view my post. Okay, so this is what we just did. And if I want to look at it in mobile, you can actually go to Customize. Those who are familiar with Chrome might use DevTools, but one way to do it in WordPress is to go into the Customize tool, and down the bottom you've got these little previews. And most Gutenberg is sort of native responsive out of the box, which is lovely. All right, I'm going to close out of the Customizer. All right, go back into my next one, actually. I'm going to go back into my pages. So that's the basics of the interface, what we're dealing with, but obviously you can do a few cool things with it. So arranging content. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the kinds of blocks, how to add text, headings, images and galleries. Moving images with text, this has been a problem for people in my courses. It is a bit fiddly, so I'm just going to show some things with that. Also grouping content, that's new in 5.3. You can group things and move them in chunks, which is cool. Adding and working with columns, they've improved the columns in the last couple of months as well. Adding a button, video, a Twitter embed, just to get an idea of how those things, and then just moving things around. So give that a crack. All right, adding and arranging content. Okay, so what kind of blocks are there? You have your most used lists, common blocks, formatting, layout elements, widgets, embeds, reusable blocks, and then sort of blocks that come in from plugins. Now, what does all that mean? Well, when I go and add a block, you'll see these got these little accordions. So you will actually see these things here. Now, out of the box, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I'll talk later about how you can add extra things to it. You have the common blocks, so there's a whole bunch of stuff, your lists, your cover, your audio, quotes, headings, paragraph, all of that stuff. We have some cool formatting things, so you can go back into Classic, you can do just custom HTML, put in a quote, and that kind of stuff. Widgets are little injections of usually things that you would have maybe able to put in the sidebar, things like that. So also plugins that have widgets that you would be able to put in the sidebar come in here as well. So I've just got WP Forms running on this site, and it allows me to put a form straight on the page, which may have been a little bit difficult in the past. So you can put things like a latest post search bar on your actual web page, which is pretty cool. Other things you'll end up here. So layout elements. So when I was talking about columns and groups, they're in here. You've also got spaces and separators and things like that. They've got this media and text thing. It's a little bit buggy still. But the other thing they've got is a button. So I'm going to pop a button on the page because this is an ugly button. Okay, it is an ugly button. So Buttons, normally if you want to put them on a web, like a page or a post, you would kind of have to just go into the kind of code and do like a class for button or something. Now, most themes will have that styled, but you'd still have to kind of give it a class. So Gutenberg has put buttons in, but they're not the native theme buttons. So if you are getting a theme made, or you've bought a theme that hasn't been primed for Gutenberg, then you may need to put in some CSS to make the buttons look like the rest of the buttons, but I'll just show you how this button does work. So you can put a link in there. It has the same sort of link functions as you'd expect. This ugly button, you can change colours. You can add your custom colours, so if you know the colours of your styles, you can add them in here. You can choose a couple of styles, so you can have the outline and change the colours of those. You can set a default so that they all look the same. Across your site, you can have changes to the border. So all those kind of things that may have been difficult for you to achieve with buttons out of your regular posts and pages, you can now do that. And they have actually added this link setting, so you can open it in a new tab. That used to be not there, but it's been added recently. So that's an ugly button. Now let me show what else have I got on this page here. So adding a button, adding columns. Let me talk to you about columns. Columns, the reason you might use columns over aligning stuff to the left is because they are responsive and they've been built in responsively. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just going to enter, click the add block button, and I'm going to go to formatting. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to layout elements. Go to columns, and you get this column layout. Now these was typically pretty hard. You used to have to use a table, or you'd have to align things to the left or right. This makes it a little bit more elegant. This is a little bit buggy sometimes, but they're getting it better. Every time they release another point something into WordPress, this seems to get a bit smoother. So you can add buttons, and then within the buttons you can add the blocks. So this is a column. And so what happens with these is when they become, go on a mobile, they'll actually stack. So that's kind of the main benefit of using columns. You also get some more layout options with that, I suppose. And you can add quite a few things to these columns. Most of the blocks will work inside it, so I can add an image in there. And then it just brings in all the native things of those blocks, so that's cool. And I talked about earlier about moving things around. Columns can be a bit fiddly to move, but you can actually, they used to be a bit harder actually, but you can, if you click to the side, you'll get the whole column block, and again, just make sure you wait for that little blue line. But you can actually have access to moving the individual elements of the column as well around, so that's kind of cool. Just be patient with this little guy. It's a little bit frustrating, but it's getting better. All right, what else have I gotten cool? Oh, grouping content. So you weren't able to do that until about last week. But what you can do is you can kind of select two things at the same time. So I'm just doing my sort of shift and collecting those at the same time. And then you can, more options, and you can make it a group. So then you can add, like move the whole group in one hit, which is pretty cool. I think so anyway. Again, this is kind of ugly. So, okay, so adding a YouTube video. As I talked about embeds before. So I'm just gonna, I've kind of copied this. Sorry, my selector's getting a bit funky. Copied this earlier. Oh. See, here we go. Here's a few of those little things that are difficult. All right, so I'm going to go choose a block. I'm going to choose embeds. I'm going to go to YouTube, click that in there and hit embed. Okay, it's going to bring in a video. I'm going to bring in a tweet, same deal, just you get the URL of the tweet that you're looking for from Twitter, and you can search. So I know I'm looking for a tweet. I can go there, click that in there, embed. So you get a lot more options to do a whole lot of fun stuff in here. And there's heaps. I mean, you can see the amount of blocks that there are. Have a play, put them all on a page, see what they look like on your theme. They are kind of dependent on your theme in a way that they'll style the same as your theme has been set up. So if you need things particularly look in a certain way, you may have to add some CSS around it or get a developer to help you. But a lot of the new themes are sort of doing a good job of it. I'm going to add a gallery because galleries are fun. And I'm just going to type gallery up here. Gallery. I'm going to just select some images. I'm going to add some that are different sizes here. Create new gallery. Okay, caption on this one. Okay. Insert a gallery. Okay, so galleries also come with options for columns. And they kind of rearrange. So it generally crops them to the best look of them, okay? If you uncrop the images, it's just going to bring them in their native sizes, which is fine mostly, unless you actually have the images sized the way that you need. This crop image tool just makes it look pretty. So that's cool. And let's have a look and see what all that looks like. So if I go view post. Is this helpful so far? Yeah. Yay! Happy murmurs, that's what I'm called. Takes a bit of practice, but honestly, it's the same theory for everything. You just got to get used to the moving of the mouse a little bit more. So that's our gallery. It looks pretty good. Our caption sort of just works out of the box. That column is there. I don't think I can move the size of this because I've got it on full screen, but anyway. Our video is just resizing nicely to the size that is available for it. Our Twitter is in there, our ugly button is in there, our search is in there. Got a search for managed WP on my website, I don't know why. So, I mean, that's just a bit of an introduction to the kind of blocks that you have and the way that you can move them around on your website. I'll take questions at the end, hopefully. I've got time. And if not, catch me in the hallways. So that's kind of a really quick overview of arranging content for you. So here's some neat tricks that I'd like to show you. Let me just see, I've got 10 minutes, so hopefully I'll get through these. All right, once I work out how to get back to my slides. Alrighty, all posts. Okay, so neat tricks. Okay. Sorry. My bad jokes at 4 o'clock in the morning. All right, so you guys know what an anchor tag is. It's pretty much just a link on your page to another part on your page. So there are a few in here. I'll show you how they work, just so that you get an idea, and then I'll show you how to make them, because they used to be a pain in the bum. You used to have to wrap a little couple of codey bits around things before. You don't have to do that anymore. So adding an anchor tag is basically just adding a tag to click to a different part of your website. So let's have a look at how to do that. So I am going to add a tag that is back to the top. So first of all, I have to determine where I want it to go to. So with the anchor tag, I've got a section that says add an anchor tag, and it jumps to there. So I am adding a bit to the top here because it's the top of my page. So I go to advanced, and you'll see I've got an HTML anchor, and I've just named it top. Now you do need to remember the name of it, because then I go down to the section that I want it to link to, okay? And I link that section using the link tool, and I make it Now, I'm not going to actually put it on this here. What I'm going to do is go down to, let's get rid of that, and I'm going to put it on here. So it says top down here. All right, does that make sense? So it's just, you put a hashtag in front of the same name that you use for the anchor tag. Now, while I'm here, let me introduce you to reusable blocks. So you might want to use this at different sections. So I'm going to turn this into add reusable blocks, and I'm just going to call it top and save that. Okay, and once you've saved something, you can then go and put it at different sections. So I might want to put it down here, and you add it just as another block, add block. I'm going to go down to reusable, and I've got one here called top, and I put that on the page, and I can put that on a page somewhere else. So I'm just going to pop it in here. Top. Okay, I'm going to update that. And I'm going to view my post. I'm going to go for time. I've got 5. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to go to copy all content on page, and I've got this back to the top, and it just takes us up there. So it's a nice way of doing it. It used to be quite hard. All right, I've got 5 minutes. Let's see if I can race through this stuff. I'll go back to editing my posts. Come on, Mampy, you can do it. All right. Copy all content on page. It's hidden, it can be difficult. You might want to copy it and paste it into something else. You can go up here to the kebab menu and go to copy all content here. So I don't know how long that's been there, but I found it the other day and I thought it was cool. You can convert some blocks to other blocks. So I've got a heading block here, which I actually want to change to something else. And when you click this little tool, so I click on the block itself, and you get a couple of options for what those things could turn into. So for instance, this is currently a paragraph block. I want to turn that into a quote block. So I click quote, and it converts it into a quote for me, which is kind of fun. So if you go and do a word text dump and you haven't formatted it, you can throw it in the page, and then you can just go and click on the individual blocks and make those headings. And again, these sections just come up with their own options. So this is a list block. This is a paragraph block. Comes up with its text settings and things like that. Copy your content on page. We've talked about that. Convert other blocks. Reusable blocks. Let me just show you the slash thing that I found out you could do recently. So I'm going to add another block. I'm just hitting enter after my paragraph, but I'm actually just going to hit slash, and it brings up a list of the blocks that I've most used, which is kind of cool. So and you can kind of scroll between them, and I think I can actually type what's one that I haven't used, like S for separator, and it'll find the thing that I want. So I could then put that in, something like that. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, so those are my neat tricks for now. I'm going to race through the rest of stuff. Convert blocks to other blocks, reusable blocks, hiding blocks. Feel free plugins to extend Gutenberg. I'm just going to be really quick with this, guys. The two that I've been using recently are the Ultimate Blocks library, so Gutenberg Ultimate add-ons, and I have been using Stackable. Now, I'm just going to show you what those things look like. Oops, didn't want to do that. Let's try that again. I'm just going to show you quickly what those actually look like on the page. I'll leave that. And extend Gutenberg with free plugins. I'm glad I organised this for myself. Makes life easier. Okay, so Ultimate blocks, you get a whole bunch of blocks, amazingly. I'm just going to add one here. And they come with their own section within the block here, and you can add a whole bunch of stuff. you go through it yourself. There's heaps of cool stuff in there. They're styled according to your theme mostly. So this is just a sliding quote, and as you can just change it as you need. And then if you click through, you can change the next one. This one is just adding some posts to the page, which is cool, and you can change the columns, I think, on that as you need. I'll put 2 in there. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong thing. I think I'm still on the testimonial. Yeah, sorry about that. So you can set number of items that it's going through, and you can set columns. So that's pretty cool. The stackable ones are very much the same. There's just a whole bunch of different options for those. You can then combine those with the grouping and the reusable blocks and come up with little things that you want throughout. You can put the video. This one, I think, if I update that page, it actually plays in a pop-up box. So there's some really cool stuff that come out of the box in those, and they are free, those ones. All right, here we go. If you want to get rid of, if you've loaded Gutenberg in and you don't want to have it on pages because it's messing with things or your theme or whatever, you can actually turn it off. And you can turn it off using a plugin called Disable Gutenberg. Now, there's a whole bunch of plugins out there. This one is got quite a lot of active installs, and it's updated quite recently. So this is the one that I recommend. You can turn things off for different author levels. So if you don't want your editors using the block editor because they are not good at it yet, or something like that, you can turn it on and off for different user levels and also different kinds of pages. You can even turn it off for individual posts and pages if you really don't want that to interfere with something that only works on the classic editor still. So I don't know if I've got any time. Stop. He's saying stop. All right, I'm stopping. We've got time for Q&A or not really? No?
Yep. Yeah, we can have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Anyone got some questions for Kath about the old G-Berg?
This guy's first because he had one.
It's a very quick.
That's right.
Just double check the search bar thing.
Yep.
That was just for the page, the post.
It's a search bar for the website.
Oh, for the whole website.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you can put that on there.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a global option to turn off blocks rather than just in a particular post?
That is a global option. So it's like it's kind of like the old screen options. It turns them off across the board.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, with the reusable blocks,
yep.
Is that are they then global? If you edit them, then it...
Yes, so you can detach.
Doing both?
Yeah, so you can use it and then detach it from the globe one. So if you want to put something different in there, but you just want to reuse the layout, or you can just use them as they are. And if you update one, you can then it'll update across the board for the ones that it's common with.
Awesome, thank you.
This fella over here was quick.
Thanks for that. You said it's not a page builder. Can you elaborate?
Okay, so I guess the way that I see page builders, and there might be some people who disagree with me here, and that's fine, is that they're more a real granular way to style design a website or work with a bare bones theme to create a full design for your website. So you're breaking out of boxes and you're actually styling things individually. Whereas this is just it's kind of like you can jigsaw it together, but it's still working within the layouts of your design. You're not breaking out of the box, so you're still keeping everything common and true to the theme styling. So it just keeps things consistent. Anybody else? I think we're good. Oh, one more person.
Does it have an accordion?
Yeah, there is in Ultimate. The stackable things as an accordion.
I noticed that you had at the top style with Elementor. Does that mean it works in together?
Yeah. So this, as I said, this particular demo was done with Astra theme, the free version, and an Astra starter site that had a whole bunch of it was built in Elementor. So you can still just go, no, I don't want to use the WordPress editor. I'm just going to break it into an Elementor page and use your page builder as you want as well.
Instead, or as well?
Instead, yeah, so Elementor, I think in the premium version, has some blocks that you can use in the block editor. And I'm not sure if it goes the other way, but that's an Elementor question I can't answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you very much, Kath.
Thank you.
If you do have any more G-Bird questions that you didn't get to ask, look out for Kath in the cute zebra dress outside later on.
Thanks, Roby.
In this room next, we've got Building Powerful Subscription and Membership Sites That Scale with Adrian O'Hagan and Ben May. In room 2, in this session, we've got Why No One Is Reading Your Blog Posts. Speaker is Kate Toon. And we also have a hallway workshop with Dion Hulse about getting involved with WordPress and its community, and that will be outside in the morning tea area somewhere there. Let's get started with the last session before lunchtime. Today we've got Ben May and Adrian O'Hagan. A bit of a background. Ben is the founder of the Code Company, who I did see a logo on the screen before, didn't I? You're shouting everyone a drink at the after party or something. Yeah, thanks for that. One of the Code... Yeah, thank you. The Code Company is one of the few Australian engineering agencies that has over a decade of deep expertise with large-scale enterprise open source and WordPress development. The firm works with clients like Nine, Pedestrian, Business Insider, iSelect, and many others. You might have heard of one or two of those. And Adrian, just let me pull up your page. Adrian comes from an agency background and has been heavily involved in dozens of WordPress deployments. In 2017, he moved client-side to join Private Media to focus on Crikey, which is Australia's longest-running, in brackets it says, and best, but that's subjective, independent digital news source. So I'm going to hand you over to Ben and Adrian, and they'll take it from here.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Ben and this is Adrian. And today we want to talk about building subscription sites that scale in WordPress. So to set the groundwork, cover off a few simple definitions. So first of all, for the purpose of today's talk, when we talk about subscription, we're also talking about membership. So I know the original talk was about subscriptions or memberships. The definition I'm trying to sort of, I guess, use is membership's usually a benefit of a subscription to a site of some sort, so just from a naming convention. And scale means two things for us when we work with clients. It means the technical scaling, so as sites grow, we talk about hundreds of thousands of users or pages or content, things like that, numbers of transactions per day, so there's the technical scaling aspect to building big sites. And there's also the business scale, so as a business grows from a smaller operation to a larger operation, things internally change, so very often you'll have a founder of a publication do everything, and then they start bringing in different people, so that might mean a product manager or a subscription manager or different teams. So the website and the subscription system has to all play along as the business scales, and it has to work as the site scales up. Subscription's not a new concept, and Netflix started notably back in the 90s doing DVD on demand as a subscription concept. Spotify very commonly for music subscription, and the world has exploded in the subscription economy. To more clever ideas, we see people like New South Wales Transport experimenting with subscription models around public transport, Nike launching shoes, subscription services. Subscription has been a really big economic changer in terms of people wanting to own less stuff and moving to a more elastic billing model, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to go through about that if you're interested in the subscription economy that we're sort of transitioning into maybe or not. Back home, Zora, who are a subscription enterprise consultancy, said a little while ago that in the next couple of years, over 70% of businesses in Australia will be offering products in some way or another through a subscription pricing strategy, whether that's product or even professional services. So narrowing the definition down a little bit more, digital subscription has two really main pieces that I'm sort of using as a foundation today. The ability to log in somewhere and the ability to restrict something, and usually by the means of a payment. So I can log into where I subscribe and I can access something if I pay for something. So that's a digital subscription in a nutshell. Last year, Reuters did a survey of top publications worldwide, and over 52% ranked subscription as the highest priority for a revenue perspective for publishers as the most important, beating things like ads and display, native, donations, and all that other sort of stuff. And that's where both Adrian and I work in the publishing world. So today's talk is going to be slightly balanced to publishing, but a lot of the principles still apply in a lot of different business models. So subscriptions in digital publishing have obviously helped do revenue diversification for publishers, and as publishers are moving from print to digital, translating that into subscription-based economy has helped publishers in that respect. And the other advantage for people in digital publishing where we work is the ability to start knowing more about our audience because they're logging in, and we can start to do things like profiling and progressive profiling and understanding people's behavior over long periods of time. Because they're not anonymous, we now know who they are. So bringing that to WordPress then, what we're talking about, and building subscription products in WordPress, which we're going to talk about some projects we've done this year, is three main parts to how we want to focus WordPress and subscription offerings. So that's making sure we've got a robust architecture of how we build subscription integrations with WordPress. So it needs to work from a technical perspective. It needs to be flexible when other developers may join a team or different agencies work on different parts of the subscription ecosystem. The business autonomy. So again, when a business might start working with a subscription, one person might be doing everything. So what we're looking for is the ability for a business to be able to change a price or upgrade a membership tier or move a user or do things like that without having to write code, log into a database, do anything like that. We want the business to have autonomy that doesn't need the development team to manage these kinds of things. And then, of course, scalability. We want growth. We want the business to be able to do things. We want to have lots of customers and all that sort of stuff. So there's 4 ways to do a subscription, broadly speaking, in WordPress. An off-the-shelf plugin, or more likely than not, a series of plugins to put that together. Building a plugin, so going and starting from scratch and building a bespoke plugin to do exactly what you're looking for. Going down like a microservice, which would be the more common way of describing it, but building a standalone application in another framework or another platform, and then integrating that back into WordPress. And the 4th option is the SaaS integration with a sort of on-demand cloud product, which is what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail today, is working with SaaS products. So just quickly going through the 4 options in a tad more detail, off-the-shelf plugins often are great to get a proof of concept up and running. There's no shortage of WordPress plugins that will do membership software. But again, if you're working in a large business that is, say, doing $1 million in subscription revenue, the economics of using a plugin that costs $100 that powers this entire business is not a usual comparison you'd make in any other part of in a business decision matrix. So often quick way to get started, but long-term implications and getting out of that plugin ecosystem can be very tangled and complicated and painful. A lot of these plugins are often, I guess, more generic built to suit the masses because they're a plugin. And as businesses want to do nuanced or specialized features, you now have to either try and reverse engineer plugins, stopgap solutions, multiple plugins, things like that. So the last thing with plugins that we've found or been burnt with as well is debugging performance. So lots of traffic going through a subscription process, trying to understand where server performance is lagging or where database performance is lagging, and understanding these kinds of things. And again, if you're paying $200 a year for a plugin that does everything, it's very hard to sort of have high expectations of it can do everything that you're wanting it to without knowing. Building a bespoke plugin is slightly better in that you're now going to have more flexibility. You sort of know exactly what you're building. It's going to be able to work the way a business may want the subscription product to work. But it's a long-term commitment to make sure the plugin continues to work. You're now taking the risk of managing things like Stripe API integration. And if Stripe updates their API, you've now got to update your corresponding API to make sure that works. So you have to explain to either your stakeholders or your client or whoever that is that it's a long-term investment to make sure that this continues to work. And if you're like anyone who we work with, are always wanting to do new features and exciting things that excite clients or excite subscription customers, rather than saying we have to upgrade an invoicing API, which is a very unappealing concept to spend money when there's more things to be doing. And yeah, it's the investment in sort of maintainability. Going down a microservice sort of architecture of building something in, say, a Laravel or a CodeIgniter or 100 other different products may be a bit quicker, but you've now broken out of the WordPress ecosystem, so you've now still got that long-term commitment of managing these 2 different things with the risk of that you've now got 2 tech stacks, so maintaining that is also going to become more complicated, as well as maintaining API integrations with things like payment gateways. You have to manage that with WordPress as well. So some quick advantages in working with specific frameworks for this, but there's a higher cost of ownership over a longer period of time as well. Brings us to the 4th, which is our flavor at the moment, which is integrating with a SaaS solution. So these are cloud-based vendors, the likes of Chargify, Recurly, and things like that, that are a business model of building subscription products and basically tying an integration between WordPress and Chargify, or whatever the product you want to talk about is. It allows you to focus on business development on the site that is subscriber-facing, so building features that subscribers are seeing and not having to build stuff that is not fun or exciting from a business perspective. And it allows business users to deal with a product that's exactly designed for what they're working with, and having a seamless integration sort of will speed up day-to-day operations and things like that. So there are 4 ways of doing it. We've been doing a lot with SaaS, the SaaS way, and we'll go through how that's done in a minute. But to sort of give some background, Adrian's going to talk about his sort of history with Crikey and their evolution of going through some of these options. And then I'm going to talk about a client that we've done and their sort of last 3 to 5 years of going through a subscription system and how that scaled and stuff like that. So I'll hand over to Adrian.
Thanks, Ben. So yeah, as Ben mentioned, I've been with Crikey for some time now. When I first started, they were actually extremely hesitant to bring on someone who was both a product manager and a technical person. And the reason for that was they'd had an extremely bad experience. The experience that they'd had was they had an existing subscription service. It was custom built for them. Something called Subscriptus. You can look it up. It doesn't really exist anymore. It was kind of a thought bubble. It was weird. And to cut a long story short, they decided this isn't working for us. It's not meeting our business requirements. We're going to migrate to another platform. These guys look fantastic. We're going to move over to them and everything's going to be wonderful. They did their due diligence. They thought everything was going to be great. They thought they had all their ducks in a row. It was like, right, we're going to move from Subscriptus to these new people. Someone flicked the switch and they did not take a payment for the next 2 months. So now you've got a business where you can't really concentrate on work because all you can hear is your management grinding their teeth and everybody is stressed. And it's not really a very fun place to be. So when it came time to take on a new person such as myself, that was a very long interview process because they did not want to have that issue again. So one of the very first priorities that I had when I came on board was to take us away from this new platform that they'd signed up to. So what was so bad about this new platform that we'd signed up to? Well, firstly, we lost 2 months of payments. Crikey is an organisation that lives and dies by its subscription base. If we're not getting paid, we can't really operate. It's just not good. Then, of course, there's the product itself. Now, for those of you who have subscriptions, and I dare say most people in this room have got a subscription of some kind, whether it's a Spotify subscription, Apple TV, heck, some of you may still be getting the newspaper delivered. That is probably like the oldest subscription model that is around. And it's totally valid. So subscription models, they're not new. They've been around for quite a long time. So as far as these subscriptions are taking place, we have a monthly subscription, we've got a quarterly subscription, we've got our annual, we've got our concession rates that we offer to people. We also have like student discount, student prices. So we've got multiple tiers of subscriptions. But with this product that we moved to, it was like, well, what if we've got all these people on a monthly plan and we want to move them to an annual plan? Oh, we can't do that. Oh, okay. So that was a problem. Then it's like, right, well, we want to run a campaign and we want to offer people like 15% off or 20% off to come on board and become a new subscriber. Oh, so if we do that, then we actually can't do that with our product. We have to create another product, which has got 20% off. Okay, we can kind of work with that. So by the time I started working with Crikey, they'd been with this vendor for quite some time. And the first thing I did was I looked at the products. I'm like, why is there like 150 products? They're all the same thing, right? They're like, yeah. Well, which one's the main one? Most of them. It's like, okay, well, how do you work out who is about to churn? For those of you who don't know, churn basically means that when you reach the end of your subscription, you don't renew. For companies such as ourselves, that's really important. So you get to the end, so how many people are about to churn? Oh, we don't know. It's like, how do you know how many people renewed this month and how many people took out a new trial or how many people took out a new subscription? We can't tell that with our data. So there was a wealth of problems with this particular service. So shortly after I started and was kind of realising what a mess I'd walked into, it was a case of, okay, well, let's see what I can do. Let's see what's going on. And then I got a Slack message from one of my colleagues in support. And she said, oh, Adrian, so it's not accepting payments at the moment. I think the API is broken. I'm like, oh, okay. Can you give me a contact number? Oh, we don't have a contact number. Well, what's their chat line? Oh, they don't have one. You can email them. I'm like, okay. They're based in Germany, right? So we had to wait 14 hours for a response. during one of our biggest campaigns, we have 2 major campaigns every year. We've got our end of financial year, we've got our Christmas campaign. I might have mentioned that subscriptions are the bread and butter of our business. None of this was great. So the whole experience made me really, really evaluate what do we need to get a better solution. What is it that we want? What is it that's not working for us? At that point, I started making a list. Not only did I do that, but I had a separate list which was basically keeping notes of every single outage, every single time they didn't respond. I was making a shopping list so that if they came to me and said, oh, no, you're still in contract, you have to do this, I would basically say, you're kidding me, right? You guys are incompetent. You are costing us money. Like the amount of money that we're paying you, we're losing exponentially more because we're not able to take payments effectively. So that is the background of Crikey. And from there, we moved on to a SaaS service. And I'll talk about that more shortly.
Yeah. So Umbrella are a client of ours we've worked with for like, I think 8 years now. And about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in a very rare series of events, we got briefed with about 2 weeks' notice to build a subscription product for them before they announced it at their annual conference they have every year. So with no designs, no brief, no idea, we started building something. And it got launched, and it was essentially a login restricted site that they called The Source, and it was like a contact access database. It had a whole bunch of research and stuff that's very important if you're in sort of the big end of the media marketing industry in Australia and things like that. At the end of the day, it was basically a gravity form that I think set up like an e-way token that we stored as meta, that then we did like the Basecamp thing. We just got that part done and live, and then figured out how we charged people after that once it was already live. So we were really playing with fire, but that was really our only option at that point. And that sort of grew from this single user having a subscription with an expiry date set as like a meta field that then we sort of checked when they logged in. Is that before today's date? Okay, they can keep going. And if they had to go back and update a gravity form, and then that would set up a new token. It was very, very poorly done, but it got launched and it got done. They then continue to invest in this product over time, and we've now built this site with a very questionable foundation that we then started dealing with things like, well, how do we have like a 5-user account? It's like, okay, well, we've got this flat structure. There's no way of doing that. So, okay, we'll just use Meta to connect user IDs like laterally, and that will never backfire on us. And then about 6 months later, they started wanting to do things, well, how do we change the primary account holder to somebody else? Like, we'd have to like log into the database, move all this Meta to another user, and then join that, and it continues to work, and then hopefully e-way still recognize, okay, that's fine. And then that evolved even further. It's like wanting to access more features and more sort of just general my account stuff. Again, it's not making their subscription anymore inviting the people to sign up. It's just how do we do this stuff? So then we had to try and migrate that whole data schema, which was very poorly done and built on top of, to a slightly more advanced one, which is now like a custom post type that stores like the account object, and then we have like Meta that connects those to users so we can easily switch them. The e-way token is now connected to the subscription entity, and then there's another custom post type where we like define the subscription products, and then that's all connected through more Meta, and then we have lookup tables to join all that Meta because there's now hundreds of thousands of Meta fields, and it takes like 3 hours to do a cron, and like we had problems on this old server that it ran where we had to run a cron to restart PHP once a day, I think it was, because it would hit a memory limit. We could never move it because it was hardwired to how this was set up. But then at the same time, we figured out at one point, because the payment cron was taking longer and longer to go through and do it, that PHP thread was doing its reset, which meant by about the 4th transaction, it was now resetting and losing the cron. So then we were sort of lagging in payments, and it would take a week to catch up. So it just continued to be a real joy to work with. And Scott, who works for us, was really tasked with a lot of this fun, and because no one else would touch it. I think Zach did a bit of a rebuild and then went on leave, and Scott had to launch it, so that was even more fun, especially trying to understand that data schema. So the Source was really fun and great to work with from a technical perspective. It doesn't even go into how much pain the internal team at Umbrella had to deal with managing this on a day-to-day or trying to understand how things like users and things were built, but it was that classic problem of we don't have time to like go back, we just need to keep going forward. And then finally one day they sort of from a business perspective decided, all right, we need to rethink how we're doing our subscription product, and more from the product perspective, but it was a great trigger for us to say, let's clean house with the back end, because you're spending 10 to 20 hours a month just on like keeping the thing alive, like just on support. Like, why can't this user renew an invoice? Like, oh, because they had a custom amount that was in 2012 and then they migrated, and it would just be like this log of going through the database to understand things that were happening every day of the week, which is not how a business should run, and we weren't spending any time on the product for them. So the source died. We deleted all the code base one line at a time, therapeutically. But we rebuilt Mumbrella Pro, which was their new product. They wanted to bring it closer in with their branding, and they'd sort of gone through a corporate rebrand as well. And part of that was building a fresh site, fresh content taxonomy, and all of that was great. And we decided to not build a subscription engine. We wanted to go to a various SaaS product, so we didn't have to have an arm's length with anything to do with invoices, billing, GST, refunds, upgrades, downgrades, trials. We don't want to know any about that. We don't have to get asked to create coupon codes or custom types of coupons. Any of that sort of stuff is just a waste of our time. So Chargeify was top of our list, and we'll go through how we arrived at that. And we were able to do a migration out of this custom WordPress integration into a new WordPress site. Chargeify was what allowed us to do actually to migrate tokens out of our custom bespoke thing into Chargeify, and it just picked up and continued to bill as if nothing had ever changed. And we migrated hundreds of users without a single payment failing or going wrong or anything like that. So in that sense, we were able to destroy this old site that was very hardwired, how everything was built to an incredibly clean system where WordPress is just running content and users, and Chargeify is doing all the business logic. We don't get asked to run reports anymore. We don't have to do anything like that. It's all managed through a platform that's designed for that, and it gives us that ability to move at different speeds. So I think finding a platform was back to you and your process going through.
Yeah, thanks Ben. Ben, you actually reminded me of like some of the other issues that we faced when.
It's like therapy. We could spend the whole afternoon probably talking about what we've worked on.
Look, when I was putting this presentation together, I was talking to some of my colleagues. I'm like, do you remember when? And they're like, oh God. There was just terror in people's eyes, which just goes to speak that when you come to a solution and you move forward with it and you're happy with it, it's how much pain gets left behind, and and typically when people have had trauma, you like to leave that behind, which is a good thing. So, getting back to finding a platform. So from our perspective, here we were with a platform that was not great, and we wanted something that was better than not great. Ideally, we would want it to be great. So I made a lot of lists. I just made a massive Excel spreadsheet, and I wrote down all the things that we wanted. I spoke to the support team because they were facing the brunt of all the people who were calling up or sending emails saying, you guys suck, you can't even take money. The payment flow was like a choose your own adventure. It was, I was amazed that they were actually able to take money. Even worse, if you were a renewing person who'd been with us like for 4 or 5 years, it was harder to give money on a subsequent basis than it was on the original basis. So, as I said, make lists. Check with your support team, make sure that that's okay. Check with your finance team because they may want to have some kind of integration with Xero's to make their reports a lot easier. And at the end of the day, time is money. It makes total sense to have that. Check with your marketing team. I can't emphasize this enough because they're the ones who come up with the campaigns that are going to be run to promote your particular service. So whether your service is, selling shoes, or whether it's selling food, or whether it's selling online publication subscriptions, it's all important. Anyone who's going to be impacted by the choice that you make, you really need to talk to them. One thing that you should also keep in mind, of course, is, depending on the kind of deal you make, you're going to be offered all kinds of amazing deals. It's like, stay with us. If you stay with us for 20 years, we'll give you a 5% discount or something stupid like that. Just be practical. So finding a platform, we've got payment processing and finance. We've got membership and plan handling. So by plan handling, I'm talking about obviously what kind of plans you're offering, whether it's an annual, monthly, the ability to swap out, ability to upgrade. Access to data and reporting. Cannot emphasize this enough. A lot of people kind of see it as a nice to have, but it's important to be able to forecast your revenues. It's important to be able to understand what it is that your audience is doing and to be able to react accordingly. And for it to be developer friendly. That's not a nice to have. That is essential. There is no single platform out there that is going to be perfect for you. But if they've got the tools for you to get in there and get dirty, then you can make it right for you. So, as far as payment processing and finance is concerned, we had a bunch of options that kind of tie into this category. First of all, we want it to be white label. We don't want something that says brought to you by PayPal or something like that written all over it. It had to look seamless. It's all about trust. If they don't trust you as a seller of goods or a seller of a subscription service who they're entrusting you to provide them that service over a period of time, then you're wasting your time. Coupon management. You don't want to be creating another product every single time you are offering a coupon. That's ridiculous. So that is really important. One thing which is a nice to have is dynamic coupons. For example, Tom comes along and he gets to the point of transaction and he decides, oh, no, I'm not going to go ahead. And so, but you've got his email address, so you send him an email and you offer him like an extra 10%. Custom to him as long as he uses it in the next 2 days. A lot of people won't offer this out of the box, but with developer APIs, you can write that kind of thing. Invoice generation. Does it include tax? Australia's a bit of a funny place globally as far as tax is concerned because, if we say a product's $20, we expect it to be $20. It's not like in the US where it's like 20 bucks and it's like, oh, by the way, actually, no, it's like, however much because it's got tax on the top of that. So you need that to be included. Promotion options, referring to a good or service being offered by, so I think that kind of came underneath the coupon management. But flexible payments. There's been a lot of talk about micropayments, the ability to maybe pay per article or something like that. Some people are interested in that, some not so much. As far as I'm concerned, for our particular model, weekly, monthly, annually, super important. The ability to switch between, I can't emphasize enough how important that is because generally speaking, people will start on a monthly basis and once they're comfortable with you, it's much easier to upsell them to an annual. And once you've got them on an annual, they are much less likely to churn. So membership and plan handling. So you've got membership level plans. So of course, I've kind of spoken about those already. Access rules. Generally speaking, if you're going to have a membership plan, particularly with WordPress, then you're talking about access. And if you're talking about access, then you're talking about, well, how much am I preventing the customer from seeing unless they're a member? Are you showing them the first 2 paragraphs? Are you showing them no content whatsoever? Is it like just a standard sign-in form or something like that? Does this platform handle it for you? So there's questions around that. Trial periods, there's multiple ways of going around this. Probably one of the industry standards ways now is to take their credit card details, give them like a month for free or something like that. But because you've got your credit card details, if they don't opt out, then it just auto-renews. I'm sure anyone who's worked with Stan or Netflix are very familiar with that kind of approach. Unique registration pages. That's also quite important because you've got different audiences. You've got your concessions who are on a very different rate to what the retail market is. And it might be a difference of about 40%. It kind of looks weird if you're saying, I'm more than happy to give you this for $200, but I'm going to give it to you for $150. You're nicer. The ability to pause and resume your subscription, that can be handy. Some people like to travel internationally. It's not necessarily such a big thing with digital nowadays, but some people like going off grid and they will actually contact us and saying, I'm going to be living in a cave for the next 3 months and I don't want my access. Switch plans and frequency I've spoken about. Transactional emails, well, that's a given, but the ability to customize those is pretty important. Change user email address. Ben was actually referring to this with Mumbrella, and I can tell you now that was a nightmare for us before. Yeah, I mean, everybody here is aware that, of course, that in WordPress you cannot change your username once you've created it. You can. It's just really bad practice. But if somebody changed their user email address, that would just get kicked up to development straight away. Should not be the case. And finally, reminders. Well, reminders kind of tie into transactional emails. But again, all of these things are things that you need to be mindful of. Access to data and reporting. So, you know, how many people who take out a trial are actually converting? You know, because that tells you what your marketing campaigns are like and what needs to be tweaked. How many new subscribers are you getting? How many subscribers are moving up and down? What kind of revenue retention are you managing? What kind of revenue breakdown? Like, there's a difference between the two. Subscriber churn, can't emphasize this enough, that should be around like 10% or so, but in some instances like 24%. Revenue forecasting, change your email address, I'm not sure why that's there, but it's okay. And accessing raw data via the API, because that way you can actually create your own custom reports, which can be very handy, particularly when you might want to work with a data scientist. Finally, developer friendly, and that enables us to do some very cool things, which I will probably speak to later, but you know, things like offering users an extra month for the sign up. Other considerations, costs and contracts, make sure that you don't take out too long a contract, and support, make absolutely certain that they've got 24-hour support either by chat or by phone, and that you've got an account manager who can look after you.
And then just very briefly, because I know we're out of time now, this is the sort of way we've been working with this in WordPress in building. So we've both been using Chargify a lot as a SaaS product. We both really have enjoyed working with it. I know Crikey and Private Media have had huge savings and huge ability to get stuff done, and it's just made their life so much easier. We've done a couple of big projects on it this year as well. The flexibility and migrating to it has just been so good to work with, and our team loves it. It's been really handy. It allows us to build a WordPress subscription product. It lets WordPress be a CMS, manages content, manages users. We can do those like white label sign-up pages. We can talk to a Chargify API. We can let it deal with things like credit card processing and accounting software and things like Xero, and the user doesn't leave the experience. Things like renewals, we can let Chargify run that. It can do every charge it needs to do. If it's good, it will just tell us through a webhook. That person's good, extend them. If not, it'll bring it back and say, turn that user off. We need to figure out why they haven't done it. And Chargify, again, has got great internal tools for managing dunning or failed payments and all that sort of stuff. And we're doing very little at WordPress, and it gives us a lot of autonomy to not have to worry about tying too closely into the integration. Lets WordPress do what it does well, managing and scaling content, something WordPress does really well. It manages users and logins really well, or fairly well. And let a tool like Chargify or whoever you go through to manage high-frequency payments, things like PCI compliance, complex subscription management, like writing all the queries in that natively. If a plugin doesn't do that, it's just so much nicer to offload that to somebody else. Let it deal with all the emails and things in the scale like that. Our summary, and thank you.
The only thing that I will follow up to say that after we did move to our SaaS solution, which was Chargify, our costs went down, our ongoing costs went down by 60 to 75%. And the transition time I mentioned before, that we lost 2 months of payments, our downtime was 0, which had people in my office basically thinking that we were rock gods. So that was kind of nice.
Cool, thank you, Ben and Adrian. Any questions? Yep, right up. Get your run on.
Thanks, guys. That was really interesting. Given the way it sounds like Chargify through the API will talk really nicely with WordPress, has that given you any thought, probably you, Ben, more so, about whether there is a plugin solution that could be built deliberately on that model? Or
there
does that
is
have the
a,
same pitfalls as what you were saying earlier with
yeah.
a plugin solution?
There is a WordPress plugin for Chargify that I think the guys at 9C's built, but it doesn't look like it's been that updated. I'm trying to pressure Chargify to get us to build a new one, whether that'll happen or not. But I guess the thing for us, there's not a lot of integration, like same way Crikey's built, like there's a Chargify system, there's a WordPress system, there's like, and Chargify has a really, sort of like working with Stripe, really good webhook system that you can monitor and test and emulate. And so we've sort of built half a dozen JSON API endpoints that are all authenticated and all that sort of stuff. And that's about it. Like, we didn't have to build very much. The sign-up stuff, there's a bit of custom dev, hooking into how that all works and making sure. But there wasn't a lot of custom code considering the complexity. And one thing I glossed over was that it's sort of decoupled in the sense that if Chargify goes down, WordPress is still off and running. The system that Crikey was on beforehand, it made a live call every single page request back to the system. And when you looked in New Relic, you're like, why is there just this 3-second like web background process? And it's like, oh, their API must be running slow at the moment. And you just have all these crazy kinds of things. So, and what makes also with working with Chargify, again, it's not a paid endorsement of Chargify, but if you were to move away from Chargify, you would really just be able to plug in another system. It's sort of decoupled enough that we're not locked on Chargify. WordPress still has all the data it needs. It has like a Chargify user ID, so we know who it is, but you could quite easily transition that to another tool if you wanted to. We're not doing live lookups every single page load to check if a user should be able to access this piece of content, stuff like that. So we're kind of really using it as a utility, not as the heart and soul as the whole product. Yeah.
I'll probably expand just a little bit on the plugin angle. So, I mean, my background is really developing processes that enable the administration, whether it be marketing, publishing, et cetera, to be able to do what they do better. So I've been able to extend the admin through things like advanced custom fields or something like that. So they're able to create their own campaigns. So, you know, you create your discount or whatever in Chargify, but then you can, via the advanced custom fields, which talks to, via the API, you can do things like, oh, okay, well, if they take out this if they use this particular coupon code, we'll give them like an extra 2 months' time or something like that. That's not something that Chargify offers out of the box, so that's what I'm talking about in terms of like off-the-shelf products. But because of the API, you can extend that and do, you know, a lot of other fun things.
So thanks for it was a great presentation. How quickly, like the turnaround time, from when you decided to use this new SaaS system to when it was fully operational and you were comfortable with it, how long did it take?
So from a clean build or a migration clean build?
Well, from your, say, well, I don't know. You can
So like the Umbrella Pro one, there was a lot of work that was nothing to do with Chargify. It was trying to understand all the old data. It's like, well, the way it was built in V1 stored it this way, and the way the date was stored in V2 was this way. So there was a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of conference calls to figure out, like, just to clean the data. So if you strip all of that out of the process and the PTSD that came with that, like, building the Chargify integration was actually pretty easy. Like, it was, and because that migration was migrating users out of an old WordPress site into Chargify backend, and it did webhooks, and it all just synced up and married up perfectly. So that was like, I think, less than a 3-month project, including migrating 3 versions of user data into Chargify, merging 3 versions of ACF data, which was nothing to do with this talk, but probably equally or more painful than the user data, going through 3 iterations of ACF storing content, migrating that into a new WordPress instance, and a whole bunch of other stuff. The Chargify piece was not a significant piece of work. Like I said, it was like half a dozen endpoints, and it works really well with testing and stuff like that. So it has always felt, for me, very confident. I've never been like, oh, why did that just happen? I'm a bit iffy about Chargify. Like, it's always been very robust. So it's never given me a reason to doubt its ability. So we've had pretty good success.
Yeah, I dare say we had a very similar time frame as well. But of course, we decided to make our lives a little bit more complicated by reskinning the site at the same time. But yeah, it was pretty painless. Like the Chargify took our existing tokens out from the old payment system, transferred it to the new ones. They did that behind the scenes for us. And as far as our development work, we're probably talking for the Chargify specific stuff and the paywall specific stuff, maybe about a month. But that was because we were super anal about making sure that everything was within our infrastructure and looks like it's within our stuff. If we wanted, there's an option where you can basically port over to your subdomain.chargify.com and you skin that a little bit, but
billingportal.com or whatever. Like
Yeah.
they've got a whole white label billing portal. So, but yeah, Chargify. Crikey's got a
and you can do
custom
that,
one.
which will save you like a couple of weeks. But we didn't want to do that. We want to make our lives difficult and make it look good.
And in terms of risk, like the stuff that really is nice for us is that it's, I guess, more of an enterprise grade product, stuff that we've been burnt on with other projects that I pulled out of the slides, but where, you're running sort of a plugin that runs on another plugin that connects to Stripe and like it runs off a WordPress cron that triggers a webhook, and if you pull that to a local dev, you think you've got every sandbox. We had one of our front-end devs pull a site down. Everything we thought was stripped down to sandbox mode, and he removed like a tier, like the silver subscription, and that somehow triggered this, which triggered that, which still had a ping to the production Stripe account, canceled their subscription, pinged the production websites, webhook, deleted the users. So Zach and I had to manually recreate, and it's just like these tools aren't designed for that kind of work. Whereas something like Chargify, we have two different instances. Everything is explicitly clear. Like we've just never had something. Whoops, we build a client, or we didn't build a client, or we just deleted everything, or. WordPress and managing things like crons and schedule tasks and stuff like that can get very daunting very quickly if you're not really across it and did all the bills go out? Did all the invoices go out today? You better just double check. When you write your own, they're the risks you take on that you have to manage yourself and hope that your queries aren't missing a one, that you just didn't bill any of these clients for 3 months and things like that. So yeah, we've never had a worry for it. So.
No more questions?
I think there's one over there.
We'll
I
feed
just
him.
want to
We'll
ask
feed him.
about the PCI compliant of the Chargify. And how do you, what sort of payment available? Is it like PayPal, or do you also support Afterpay or something like that?
So in terms of the integration from the PCI side of things, they've got an API similar to a bit like Stripes and eWays, where it's like a client-side JavaScript combo backend thing. So you'll do part of the transaction through a token back to the site, then it'll validate and then send the rest through a webhook. So you're not sort of no credit card details are touching your site. It's all getting done client-side and then validated through a backend IPN kind of thing. So. In terms of PCI, we never touch credit cards. It's always client-side and through their new API and similar to a lot of credit card APIs. And did you want to talk about the options like payment gateways and stuff? There's a lot.
Well, I mean, we're using Braintree, but we could have used Stripe just as easily. I have spoken with Chargify recently. They've got Google Pay and Apple Pay coming up soon, which is going to be kind of quite big for us.
I don't think Afterpay would work because Afterpay you'd always be. That's a subscription. It's a subscription already. So Afterpay is like a subscription for the first payment of the subscription. So you'd probably never really get ahead on Afterpay for a subscription product.
And certainly from our perspective, Afterpay is just it doesn't make any sense for our particular business model. So we wouldn't even entertain that.
You would just set up like a subscription product of weekly. If you wanted to get the amount that small, you could just have a weekly subscription pricing version. Yeah, would be the way to do it.
PayPal, yes. Yep.
We haven't used PayPal in a long time either. Credit card seems to be a bit more fluid.
Question up the back there.
And also
the politics of PayPal.
Well, yeah, they charge a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, we're using eWay, Braintree, Stripe. It's pretty flexible like that, so you can plug and play with different vendors.
Hey there. You said you use Braintree, is that?
That's right,
correct?
yes.
What was the kind of decision process behind that versus?
Legacy.
Okay.
It was purely there when I'd arrived, and I didn't want to. I mean, that process, we changed a payment platform, a mail delivery platform, probably within within maybe a 3-month period. So effectively, all of our big providers were being changed at the same time. I really didn't want to make my life any more complicated than it had to be.
And I think before it was Braintree, it was like some weird, not mainstream credit card processing brand. So it went from that to Braintree, and I'm guessing that was like one less fighter. Like,
Yeah.
poke the bear anymore with all the various tools that are getting changed. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing against Stripe. I personally use Stripe for any personal project that I work on, and they're great. All things being equal, I'd probably prefer to be over with Stripe because I think they've already got stuff to do with Google Pay and Apple Pay, etc.
Cool.
All right. I think it's lunchtime. A note on that: before you get up and go out, lunch is being moved upstairs, where there's a bit more room at the back of the cafe. If you did fill in any dietary requirements in your registration, please ask at the counter. We're just doing that so that it doesn't go missing. Other than that, please enjoy lunch.